When I say that I cried from beginning to end, I cried from beginning to end, and that is a testament to James Gunn as a screenwriter. Hey everyone, welcome back to Candid Cinema. I'm Amanda, otherwise known as AMX ND Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Today I will be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, this is the family of the MCU, and I know what everyone's gonna say. Fantastic Four is the first family, technically, but we were introduced to Guardians of the Galaxy first on screen. And I always felt like the Guardians were the close-knit family versus the Avengers, because the Avengers had a lot of issues and they fought a lot within the grouping of the Avengers. I never thought or even saw them as a family. I never felt like a family. It just felt like a team more so. But Guardians brought that familiarity that I feel with my friends, because I am an only child and I've always been an outcast growing up, and it's just a group of outcasts with very, very individual personalities coming together and learning to live with each other, grow with each other, and ultimately care about each other and love each other. I think that's what James Gunn's trilogy now has shown. I think that this, Volume 2 aside, which I do have to rewatch it just because I absolutely loved Volume 3. I admit that Phase 4 of the MCU wasn't the greatest for me. It didn't have a strong enough run for me to love everything about Phase 4. There were a lot of misses, more misses than, celebratory films that we were championing. And I feel like this one in particular, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, James Gunn kicked it old school. And what I mean by kicking it old school is that you could feel that familiarity of before Endgame, before Infinity War. You can feel that with James Gunn's style, because obviously he's worked with the Guardians for almost like 10 years now. It's like a long time for Gunn to work with these characters, and he knows them through and through. And I think that with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, we're going back to the roots of Marvel and what made Marvel so fantastic for those first 3 phases. Now, I know it sounds like I'm completely crapping on Phase 4. There were a lot of great things that happened in Phase 4, don't get me wrong, but I didn't feel that sense of comfort where I was strapped in and I knew that these characters were taken care of, and I have my thoughts about James Gunn and DC and all of that hoopla or whatever. The one thing that James Gunn has done so beautifully is bring the Guardians of the Galaxy to life. Bottom of the barrel characters, literally made them into the family of the MCU that we all love and adore. So I think that the journey with these characters came to a perfect conclusion. And I have to admit that this is one of the best stories that any MCU heroes have gone on. Apart from Captain America, let's just exclude him because that's my boy, can do no wrong. But this is one of my favorite journeys. Sure, are the characters kind of jumbled if it wasn't focused on Rocket or wasn't focused on Star-Lord and Gamora? Yes, some of the writing, obviously the jokes and all of that, they didn't land at times. I felt like there were characters just shoved in there, i.e. Adam Warlock, even though Will Poulter did a great job with what he had to do. I felt like it was overly long, but at the same time, I was enjoying the ride, so I didn't care that it was that stretched out. There's some little things there. They could have tightened it up a bit. The editing wasn't the best, I have to admit. Even during some action scenes and some very simple conversational pieces, it was weird. There were some choices where I'm like, why would you cut there? Why is that a close up there? It was just some weird choices that were made throughout where I felt like there were some very dead moments. The transitions weren't the best. It felt rushed at the beginning, and then we stayed with the actual story, which was Rocket's, for a long period of time, which I didn't mind. I'm happy that we kind of dived right into that, because he is the heart and soul of this movie. And I really liked how they turned it. There are no spoilers here. Absolutely no spoilers here, but I just love Rocket's journey in this. I am just so happy for this character because for me, he was like the heart of the Guardians from the very beginning. I didn't think it was Gamora. I always felt like it was Rocket holding everyone together because even though he is the number one a-hole, okay, he loves the rest of his a-holes in the galaxy, okay? So he loves them, and that's really important here. So I think that the technical aspects that we have grown accustomed to in Marvel, they were there. The editing, like I said, the script, some jokes didn't land. A lot of things were like dead air, especially between Drax and Mantis. Like, I know that everyone loves that pairing, but I understand now in this third one why they put them together. I just don't think that a lot of it worked, unfortunately, or I've just grown tired of Drax. I didn't like Nebula in this so much just because she was angry for majority of the film, and once you're like here in anger, there's absolutely nowhere to go. So I think that like keeping her here the entire movie was a choice that I didn't really agree with because I just didn't care for Nebula in this film, which is very unfortunate because she was one of my favorites early on, and now I didn't like her in this. I liked what they did with Peter Quill. It's weird because I felt like Peter took a back seat in this. They were still kind of peeling back the layers of why he was feeling the way that he was after losing so many people in his life. Like they were still talking about that and how he feels, but he took a back seat to this, and I kind of liked that he did. Not that I don't love him. I think Star-Lord's like one of my favorite characters. I do love him. I think that Chris Pratt was the perfect person to play Peter Quill and to play Star-Lord. We see that in this, but I like that he took a back seat because, as I said, this movie is all about my boy, Rocket Raccoon. And when I say that I cried from beginning to end, I cried from beginning to end. And that is a testament to James Gunn as a screenwriter because he knows what's going to really like pull on our heartstrings when it comes to Rocket. Because you have to understand, many of us, okay, we hide our feelings. We hide our emotions. So when we hide our emotions, we're kind of cranky, we're irritable, we're sarcastic, majority of the time. That's who Rocket was. That doesn't mean he doesn't care or he doesn't feel anything. That doesn't mean that, but we know how to hide our feelings. Many of you who are going to watch this video are going to watch Guardians of the Galaxy. You're going to connect with Rocket. So when people see someone who appears strong all the time and doesn't care, he shrugs it off and is always sure of himself, go through what he goes through in this film and the flashbacks that we see for Rocket and his story with the High Evolutionary, who was absolutely fantastic in this. I think he's one of the best villains that we've had in a very long time. He was great. We learn about Rocket. I cried. Okay. I was crying because you have one of the strongest characters completely just falling apart in front of your eyes. It is so emotional. I think everything to do with Rocket was perfectly written. Everything else just felt like excess and, you know, the typical heists that they have to perform and all of that is your typical Guardians movie, and that's fine because it worked. It felt like the best aspects of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 surrounded Rocket, and that was a big chunk of what this movie was. And I think the focus on Rocket improved everyone else's storyline as well. As you watch the film, I think you'll understand what I'm saying, and you'll appreciate Bradley Cooper's performance as Rocket Raccoon. And I from the very beginning, the one thing that impressed me the most, and I think that's why I was so connected to Rocket from the beginning, is that the CGI is bloody phenomenal in this. The VFX work, some of the best in the MCU, if not the best. Like, obviously, with Guardians, you're working with an entire green screen. Okay, you're creating galaxies, you're creating these planets, and it feels so like alive, and there's so much texture that fills the screen on these planets that you feel like they're concrete, that they're there, and it blended in perfectly. And that is like an accomplishment. Everything looked real. It's just beautiful to look at. The first time I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, I was just so taken aback by like, we're in space. I believe that we're in space. We're crossing these galaxies. Like, I believe that. And like the color palettes created was so vibrant and like really just beautiful to look at. And again, I know that it's all CGI, but like it's so believable. And you escape with these characters that you've grown to love. And I just felt like I was on another adventure with all of them, like one last ride with all of them. And I was just so happy sitting there watching this thing. I got a wave of nostalgia. And that's not to say that we're not getting good stuff now, as I said, but it just felt like home. That's the best way to describe it. It felt like home. The Guardians have always felt like the comfortable family that you go back to, that welcome you and accept you. And that's what happens in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It is, for me, one of the perfect endings, one of the best MCU movies. I really had a lot of fun with it. I know that people are going to question the script a lot in regard to what they did with Adam Warlock, the excess with adding a whole other task for them in the third act that was completely unnecessary, but tied into what the High Evolutionary wanted to do. So I understand why they tied that in. It feels long and messy at the same time that I'm saying like, this is a perfect ending. But in context, if we're like looking at it solely in the MCU, this is one of the best MCU movies. It's hard for me to be like, if I grade it this way or I grade it this way, like I want to be as fair as possible, but I did really love it. I just felt so happy watching this. For me to cry, you know, like I know I say that I cry about everything, but this one just got to me. Like I was sobbing throughout. Like I had tears forming throughout the entire film, which is crazy to me. That hasn't happened in a long time. The soundtrack is also incredibly strong. One of my favorites. You got Radiohead in there, you got the Beastie Boys in there, and those needle drops, killer, especially the Beastie Boys. I was vibing. This has another iconic hallway fight scene that I am really happy about, and I was just beaming. I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a 4.5 out of 5. I want to give it a 4 out of 5 just because I know that there are many issues with this film, but I was just really happy with it. Logistically, there are things that are said with Gamora that didn't quite make sense, which is why I would give it a 4 instead of a 4.5 out of 5. It's like you forgot how things worked with Endgame and how things worked with Infinity War in regard to Gamora. So that was the only thing where I'm like playing with a 4.5 out of 5, just because of what was said and how Gamora was worked into this team this time around. I think that was a negative. So my ranking of the trilogy, I guess, would be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Volume 3, and then Volume 2. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry, but the trilogy as a whole will make you appreciate Volume 2 a bit more if you weren't a fan of it, but it will also make you appreciate the presence of the Guardians throughout the entire MCU as the OG family on screen. Okay? On screen. That's our family. That's my family. So if you guys enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below if you loved Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, how you would rank the trilogy. Let me know in the comments below. You guys can always follow me over at AMX NDA Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you guys want to help me out and make this channel amazing and help me grow this wonderful community, you can find out ways to do that down below. I'll catch you guys next time. Keep watching movies.